다음으로 글로벌 에너지 산업의 변화와 나아갈 방향을 주제로 세미 카멜 GE파워 제너럴 매니저께서 발표를 해 주시겠습니다. 오늘 컨퍼런스는 영어 동시 통역이 제공됩니다. 한국어 1번, 영어 2번입니다. 한국어 1번, 영어 2번입니다. 그럼 세미 카멜 GE파워 제너럴 매니저를 큰 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers of the event for hosting us in GE to be part of this important event. And it's a real pleasure for me to be able today to take some of your time to share with you the GE view on how the energy sector is transforming as a result of technologies and a result of big trends that are happening in the world, and how are we reacting to these transformations. So I'd like to start with just a quick overview of GE today as it stands. A combination of multiple businesses. GEpa워 on the far left side, this is a $30 billion company today after the acquisition of Alstom. We have GE Energy Connections. This is our T&D business. The renewable energy business, GE Oil and Gas. Now it's a bigger company after the merger we have with Baker Hughes. GE Aviation, transportation business, the healthcare, and lighting. We're transforming the company to become a digital industrial company. And by that we mean that we are introducing digital as the common thread among all of these businesses and capitalizing on the marriage between software and the assets and the technology assets that our customer have to extend the life of these assets to make them more optimally operated. So this is the sort of the future direction of where GE is heading today. Big forces we're seeing today and challenges, creating challenges and opportunities that are happening today in the energy world. In terms of challenges, you have the GDP growth, not a very consistent GDP growth across the world. We're seeing a slowdown in many parts of the world. Policy changes, some of them creating opportunities, others creating challenges to the industry. The financing constraints facing some of the governments today in the world in relation to investment in the infrastructure sector. And then in terms of opportunities, we have the emerging regions, the growth we're seeing in Southeast Asia, in India, in China, in Latin America, Middle East, etc. Clean energy growth in general as a result of the improved economics of the technology, and digital. That's the digitization of the energy sector and the utility sector globally. Now, before we look at where things are heading, it's good to also look at the past. How did the energy industry and specifically the electricity sector has behaved in the past? So this is the consumption of the electricity in key countries in the world, in key regions in the world. And what you can see here is that really the growth has been taking place in the developing world. Southeast Asia, China, India, Middle East, etc. While in the US, EU, Australia, Japan, the electricity consumption rates have been more or less stable. Also in some parts, like in Japan, maybe even going down a little bit. And this is a combination of two things. Improvement in the efficiency, especially on the demand side, but also a slower economic growth taking place in some of these parts of the world. So in GE, for example, when we look at this slide, we know that the future and where things will be heading, we know that we're the countries and the regions where we'll be investing in establishing more offices, hiring more people. It will primarily be in the developing world. Another view also of the past 50 years when it comes to a breakdown of the generation capacity additions that took place in the last 50 years, broken down by technology type, but also by region. And we have identified three big investment waves, if you will, that break down this period of time. There was the emerging investment wave, emerging markets, and that's primarily seen here in the China boom, and then the global boom in terms of new generation capacity being added in other parts of the developing world, like Asia, Middle East, and Africa, etc. There was the replacement wave, and that's primarily in Europe and the US, where lots of the addition, new generation capacity addition, was actually to replace retiring fleets. And then there is a renewable wave. And that's reflected here, as you can see, starting from year 2005 and onwards. In the lower chart, you see more investments in hydro, in wind, and solar. And this is really where the future will be heading more. This is our own internal analysis. So in GE, what we do is that every year we build our own forecast for how the new generation capacity to be added, how it will look like by technology type. So on the bar chart, on the left and the right-hand sides of the chart, you see the generation breakdown in 2015, and basically gas and coal and oil were the biggest chunk of the generation mix, combined with some solar, some wind, some hydro. In 2025, the picture changes a little bit. You see less fossil fuels, less share for coal and gas, although they continue to be the majority of the generation mix, but then bigger share of renewables. Now, in the pie in the middle, what you're seeing, this is our forecast for the total new generation capacity additions that will take place from 2016 to 2025. Almost half of the pie, the total of 2,570, will be fossil fuel, between the blue portion, which is gas, and the 21%, which is coal. But then almost the other half will be renewables. And that's pretty significant, actually, addition in new generation capacity and renewables between solar, wind, and hydro. Still, the share of renewables in 2025 when it comes to generation continues to be not that big because of the lower capacity factor of renewable energy technology. Again, a chart like this that gives us in GE guidance on the investments we need to make in new technologies and power generation technologies, and how do we allocate these investments in terms of new products to be launched based on forecasts that we see. Another chart showing where the future is heading from between 2010 and 2025. The green portion of the bar chart are the developed world, developed countries, and this is the electricity consumption, and it will be more or less stable at around 1% increase. But then in the developing world is where we will see the biggest share of increase, which is around 4%. And this is driven by population growth, economic growth in parts of the world like ASEAN region, MENA region. Energy-intensive industries, aluminum industries, smelters, steel plants, etc., continue to go to the developing world to be established there. While in the developed countries, it's more, like I mentioned earlier, demand-side efficiency, energy intensity declining in general. There's a move from manufacturing to the services sector in places like Europe and the US. And that is impacting the intensity of energy consumption in these parts of the world. Now, one of the new concepts we are currently developing in GE is what we call the energy ecosystem. We are working with our customers, with governments, with vertically integrated utilities, with the ministries of energy, to transform the way they look at the energy infrastructure in the country and have what we call an ecosystem view of the different verticals in that industry. In other words, we want our customers, we're helping them, working with them, especially using digital as a common thread here, to evaluate investments and evaluate optimization in the different verticals in the energy infrastructure value chain, from exploration production of an energy unit, be it, for example, natural gas, BTUs of natural gas, all the way to electricity generation, but all the way to transmission, distribution, and consumption at the household level. That holistic view, when it's established as an infrastructure tool to evaluate your investments, it enables governments to better optimize the investments they make across this value chain. Today in the world, about $5 trillion is spent every year on these different verticals, both greenfield plants, but also optimization or upgrading of brownfield facilities. So efforts to help governments to optimize the spend of this $5 trillion would deliver positive impact to everyone. Now, these are the key transformations that we have identified that have resulted into our thinking about the energy ecosystem. There are nine of them, and you can see here on the left-hand side, the demand-side efficiency is the first one. The demand-side management is also another transformation. The electrification of things, so electrification of the transportation sector, for example. Distributed generation and how it's becoming more and more now common in many parts of the world. The decarbonization of the energy sector. Universal access, which is basically providing access to those who do not have energy sources to electricity primarily in the developing world. The age of gas and the abundance of cheap natural gas as a result of shale gas revolution. Water and energy nexus, how they are closely connected to each other, delivery and production of energy and how much, and water as well. And then the digitization of everything. And that's, like I mentioned earlier, the software or digital layer now being imposed on across all of the energy and the energy infrastructure in a country. So these transformations have really driven us to develop the concept here of the energy ecosystem, to work with governments on optimizing that ecosystem from an investment perspective, but also how it's being operated and maintained. We've identified 5 disruptors, if you will, and these disruptors are facing today the power utility sector. They're all technology-driven, these disruptors. The first one is energy efficiency, so improvement in the efficiency, consumption, but also production. Rooftop solar and the considerable amount of rooftop solar capacity being installed globally every year. 2015, there was about 47 gigawatts installed of rooftop solar. Energy storage, the cost of energy storage went down by 40% in the past few years, and we continue to go down. We expect that energy storage will play a disruptive role in 5 years' time to the utility sector, the same way wind and solar are today disrupting the conventional power generation sector. On-site power, combined heat and power, and the ability to deliver efficiencies of 80% or more. And then the data and analytics, and that's the digitization piece I talked about earlier. Between these 5 disruptors, the conventional power utility today is being challenged and being completely transformed and being forced to look at innovative business models, like what also was mentioned earlier by one of the speakers, and to look at how really to respond to these transformations in the utility sector. Now, the digital industrial transformation that I mentioned earlier, this is more, let's say, more details on how it's impacting the utility sector. Through the marriage of analytics and software, along with the assets, be it a gas turbine, a wind turbine, a steam turbine, etc., we're able to deliver benefits to the utility. For example, the digital power plant, and this is one of the GE solutions that we have installed in many parts of the world. We're able to deliver benefits like 3% increase in fuel efficiency in the plant. Increase output by 2%. Unplanned downtime goes down by 5%. 1M cost can be reduced all the way to 25%, etc. Same thing can be delivered for a digital wind farm. So we go to an installed base, a wind farm that's operating today, and we deploy a digital solution for the wind farm and deliver those benefits for the wind farm operator. A deeper look into the power generation disruptors that I talked about earlier. If you look at energy efficiency, specifically the LED lighting and its share in the US market, for example, LED lighting is expected to drive energy use in the US by 200 terawatt hours, which is equivalent almost to $15 billion of savings. On-site power and combined heat and power. Rooftop solar is growing, as I mentioned earlier. It's all enabled by policy. Here you see our forecast for the annual installs, and demand-side management also will play a big role. Like I mentioned earlier, smart buildings, zero-energy homes, all will play a big role in contributing to a more efficient use of electricity at the end user's level. Solar has been also witnessing dramatic changes in the past few years. This is our view of where solar is heading, and you see the cost of solar here, dollars per watt. In the past few years, between 2005 and 2015, The module capacity increased by 100 times. The price of silicon went down by 80%. Module price itself went down by 90%. Efficiency went up to at least by 4 points, now to 16 and even more than 16%. So we'll continue to see solar really disrupting the utility sector, like I mentioned earlier, as a result of these improved economics. In parts of the world, like in California today, we're seeing solar energy coming in during the sunlight hours of the day to replace or to encroach on the operating hours of the gas turbine-fired power plants. That is impacting the level of utilization of these plants, and it's also impacting the services of these gas-fired power plants. We've been tracking the cost of solar in key projects in the world. Utility-scale solar PV IPP projects. These are the tariffs for the PPAs, power purchase agreements signed in some of these projects, and you can see the continuous decline of the tariff for solar PV. The lowest recorded was 2.9 cents per kilowatt hour in the UAE, in Dubai. Few months later, after this project, actually there was another project that was signed at 2.3 US cents per kilowatt hour. So continuous decline of solar PV. Of course, this is a combination of technology improvement, but also there was a smart and cheap financing in the structuring of these IPP projects. Wind, same story. Continuous decline in the cost of the technology. You're seeing here the cost per kilowatt hour for wind in the past few years, how it's been declining. Today, 5 US cents per kilowatt hour and less. In Egypt, a few months ago, 250 megawatt IPP wind farm signed the PPA at 4 US cents per kilowatt hour. This is competitive to conventional gas-fired plant or coal-fired plant, actually. Of course, the wind conditions in that site were ideal, 9 meters per second, wind speed, but also capacity factors of 50% or more. See here also here on the right-hand side, the improvement in the overall economics of wind. Again, that is contributing to more renewables coming into the grid, bigger challenges for conventional power generation. The electrification of the transport sector, which I talked about earlier, it's being driven by 4 key forces. The first is decarbonization of the infrastructure and governments wanting to decarbonize and reduce the emissions from the transportation sector primarily. The improvement in the economics of electric vehicles. Battery cost of electric vehicles went down by 65% in the past few years. The range today, 2017, more than 200 miles, announced by several manufacturers. More investment in autonomous vehicles, like by Google, Tesla, Ford, etc. And then the urbanization in general of the human population. By 2050, there will be more than 60% of the human population living in cities, in urban clusters. So our expectation is that by 2040, there will be about 2,700 terawatt hours of additional demand on the grid, driven by the need to recharge electric vehicles. This will represent around 400 million cars to be operating at that time, by 2040. A deeper look at the electric vehicle industry and how it's growing. 2015, the population of electric vehicles is around 1 million. Last year, 2016, this number doubled. Now it's around 2 million cars globally. Our expectation is that by 2020, there will be around 6 million electric vehicles in the market, and then the number will continue to increase as we move forward in the future. It's driven by big investments in the automakers like Volkswagen spending $2 billion on electric vehicle charging technology. Chevrolet just announced the Bolt car in 2017 with the range of 230 miles driving range. Ford spending a lot of money on autonomous cars by 2021. Also, there's the policy element and the incentives introduced by governments. In China, there are the quotas. In the US and Norway, there are incentives. For example, the incentives in Norway, up to $12,000 incentive. And today, electric vehicles represent around 23% penetration in Norway. So improvement in the economics, combined with policy instruments introduced by governments, all pushing for more increased deployment of electric vehicles in many parts of the world today. You cannot talk about electric vehicles without talking about energy storage. They're both linked together. The economics of storage, like I mentioned earlier, is transforming. The cost of storage is going down drastically. If you look here at the left-hand chart, so today, 2015, the 4-hour battery system cost around $600 per kilowatt hour. By 2020, that cost will go around 300 to become $375. And we expect around 4 gigawatts of storage capacity will be available on the grid. By 2025, around 8 gigawatts will be available. Today, for example, in California, they have a target of 1.2 gigawatt storage on the grid by 2020. And this is storage to be used as peaking plants. So batteries will come in to replace simple cycle, gas-fired peaking plants will be replaced by battery large-scale storage. And we're already starting to see storage plants being today built in Southern California. On the right-hand side, this is the US potential investment, and you see how storage will encroach on conventional power generations, where batteries will come gradually to replace conventional power generation as the cost of storage goes down. Another also big transformation is in the form of technologies that are available today to enable governments and to enable oil and gas companies to liquefy or compress natural gas at a small scale. So historically, you would need large quantities of gas to be available to justify the economics of LNG conversion or compression of natural gas. Today, in GE and other companies, there are technologies at a smaller scale that enables governments really to utilize and leverage small quantities of gas. For example, stranded gas. We're working with one of the national oil and gas companies in the Middle East. They have small quantities of stranded gas in the desert that is too small to justify extending a pipeline to transport this gas, but also too small to justify extending a grid line and generate power on site and transmit the power through the grid. So what we're doing with them is that we are helping them liquefy this gas to become LNG, put it on trucks, and then deliver it to remote locations where LNG replaces diesel fuel consumption. It's cleaner, less emissions, but also they're able to leverage gas that before they were not able to leverage due to small quantities and how fragmented its locations was. Another big transformation today is taking place where the US shale gas and US LNG, the economics of transporting it to faraway locations or markets like the Asia hub, for instance, has improved a lot. As a result, for example, for the expansion that took place in Panama Canal a few months ago, middle of last year. US vessels now, LNG vessels, are able to reach Asia markets faster at a lower cost. And that is improving the price because there's more competition now in the Asia hub for LNG, between LNG suppliers. This is a list of the countries that received US LNG in the past few months, including also Japan, just received the first shipment in January from a US LNG supplier. Fuel cell technology is also a big transformation that's taking place, and between the US and Korea, both countries are leading in this area. You see here, if you look at the comparison of fuel cell technology in terms of the value propositions it can bring to the customer. In terms of modularity, in terms of ultra-low emissions, dispatchability, the efficiency levels of 60% or more, and new water production. Only fuel cell technology compared to these other technologies, be it diesel engines, solar PV, gas engines, etc., fuel cell has all of these value levers or value propositions that are covered or deliver benefits to the end user. Today, it's around $1 billion market, driven by government incentives. Like I mentioned, US and Korea are the biggest players. They have about 75% of the share of the market today. In GE, we are investing in fuel cell technology. Our target is to drive the cost down all the way to $1,500 per kilowatt. Today, it's around $4,000 per kilowatt. our target from an R&D perspective to drive it all the way to 1,500. We're looking at establishing a $1 billion business focused on fuel cell technology. And the range will be between 1 to 10 megawatts of capacity generation. Now, talking about transformations, all these transformations are driven by innovation. So I'll quickly touch upon how do we drive innovation in GE. And there are 3 examples I would like to talk about, or let's say platforms for innovation in the company. There's the Global Research Centers, and then FastWorks, which is an internal process we've adopted from Silicon Valley, and GE Ventures, which is our capital investment, venture investment arm of the company. Our R&D centers are located in 6 places and countries in the world. In New York is the headquarters, but also we have in India a global research center, 1 in China, 1 in Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and Germany. About 55,000 engineers and PhDs are working in these research facilities. These are really the kitchen where all of the new technology from GE and all the innovation in GE takes place, happens at the R&D stage first. Around 3,042 patents were registered in 2016. We spend about $5 to $6 billion every year on R&D to develop technology solutions that help our customers resolve challenges they're facing in the infrastructure sector, in the healthcare sector, in the aviation sector, etc. This is the typical cycle for a new product, how what it goes through in terms of from the idea and discovery stage, and then assessment of the feasibility, investing in the development of the product, and then a transfer process takes place where the product is transferred from the research center and then overtaken by the business unit itself inside GE, be it GEpa워 or GE Aviation, depending on the product. And then the business invests in the manufacturing of the product, converting it from a concept all the way to an actual product, and then commercial maturity and the deployment in the market. So this is the typical cycle of development of new product and technology solutions that we have in the company, driven by these research centers I showed earlier. We have in GE what we call the GE store, and this is really the big value creation we bring for the governments we work with and the companies and the customers we work with. And basically, the GE store is the combination of the technologies we have from the different businesses, be it the aviation business, the power business, renewable energy, etc. We have 4 pillars in the center, and these 4 pillars are the culture of simplification in the company, the global research centers I just talked about now, the global growth organization. This is an internal team in GE that drives incremental growth and takes the GE business to new geographies and bring additional growth to the businesses. And then the GE Digital, which is the common digital thread I talked about across all of the businesses. One example for in how the GE store is leveraged to benefit our customers, some of the sensor technologies and sensors developed in GE Healthcare, in our MRI machines, radiologist machines, were actually are being today used in some of our sensors in the oil and gas fields for technologies related to electrical submersible pumps and the smart field concept. So through Global Research Center, we're able to leverage different technology development, different solutions from across the businesses. And we are working with governments and working with our customers to leverage this GE store across the board. FastWorks is an internal process in GE that we have adopted. It's a set of tools and a set of capabilities that we have transferred from Silicon Valley, because as a big technology company, we always want to make sure that we are fast enough for the market. And when we look at Silicon Valley and how the startup companies are evolving there are lots of important lessons a big company like GE can learn from Silicon Valley. And here you can see some of what we're interested in terms of traits and characteristics we're bringing from Silicon Valley, from the startups to GE. So we're interested in the speed of how fast they are in reacting to the market needs, the agility they have, the courage, the talent, the user-centric solutions that they have in Silicon Valley and startup companies. So we're transferring this culture from startup companies into GE through Fastworks. And basically what Fastworks is, like I mentioned, is a set of tools and processes that we have introduced in the company where we are able to do faster development of technology concepts and products that are deployed in the market in a faster way, but in the form of prototypes instead of a full-fledged product. And then we learn from these prototypes based on the feedback from the customer, and then we modify these prototypes continuously until we reach the, let's say, the perfect product that's needed by the market. Fastworks enables us to get closer to our customers, to increase our speed to the market, increase the chance of success, but also leading an entrepreneurial culture in the company and encouraging the GE employees to take bigger risks and not to be afraid of failures. This is the framework that we adopt in GE for Fastworks. So it all starts with identifying what the problem statement is. What is the problem I'm trying to solve? Defining the problem as a project team. Then we go into the stage of leap of faith. And this is basically identifying the assumptions that need to be true to achieve the vision that we have. And then we go out and we test these assumptions in the form of a minimum viable product. And this is the prototype I mentioned earlier. We build a series of tests and we validate the assumptions. We take that MVP, we share it with a select group of the customers. We get their feedback. We take the feedback and we see what did we learn from the customer. We adjust our strategy based on the learnings, and then we decide whether we pivot or we persevere, and then we continue the cycle until we've reached that final product that needs to be deployed, and it matches exactly what the market needs. Now, how different this is from how historically we used to deploy products? It would take us maybe 2 to 3 years, for example, to develop a new gas turbine, or maybe 4 years. And then we launch the gas turbine, and we're hoping that it's exactly what the market needs. But today we are developing the concept, and then we take a prototype of the characteristics of this gas turbine. We share it with the market. We get their feedback, and then we modify the design. We continue to do that in shorter intervals of time until we are ready to launch the final product that has captured the priorities of the customer. That process here, we've actually copied from startups in Silicon Valley. And we have advisors from Silicon Valley in California working with us as consultants who have helped us establish this culture of Fastworks to drive innovation inside the company. Another platform for innovation in GE is GE Ventures. So GE Ventures is our venture capital arm of the company. It's a team in GE that's based in Silicon Valley. And what we do is that we invest GE money in startup companies that has strategic value to our businesses. Today, we have invested about 90 portfolio companies, all based in Silicon Valley, but also in other parts of the world as well. The investment budget we have is around $200 million. The investment ticket per company is ranged between $1 million to $5 million, sometimes go all the way up to $10 million US per startup. We're investing in companies that are active in the software analytics space, in healthcare startups. We're also investing in energy startups and advanced manufacturing enterprise. So you see all of these sectors are related to what we do in GE. And this is really an acknowledgement that innovation should not necessarily come organically from within the company. Innovation could be driven from outside of the company. And we want to capture innovation that's taking place outside of GE through GE Ventures team and investing some of the GE money in these startup companies. Just a quick overview to conclude my presentation. Our presence in Korea and the partnerships we have with Korean partners. 1,500 employees in Korea across all of the GE businesses. And these are either our offices or manufacturing centers or service centers across the country. We're also doing a considerable amount of business with Korean EPCs and Korean partners outside of Korea. We're working with Korean EPCs in the Middle East, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in ASEAN region. About $1 billion worth of business takes place every year in collaboration with the Korean EPCs outside, again, of Korea. Here are some of the key examples of technology collaborations we've been having with Korean partners. The digital engagements we've had with LS, the Doosan acquisition for the heat recovery steam generation facility, our deployment of the first high-efficiency 7HA.02 gas turbine at Anyang. So continuously working with Korean companies and the Korean government and with KEPCO to deploy and to partner on technology transformations. And then finally, just to leave you with one fuel of thought to reflect how the technology and how the economy is really transforming. If you look at, in 1990, the top 3 auto manufacturers, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, their total market capitalization was $36 billion. And they employed 1.2 million people in total. And then in 2015, the top 3 Silicon Valley firms, Google, Apple, and Facebook, they had a combined market cap of $1.2 trillion. And they only employed 140,000 people. So you see how value creation in the economy has completely changed from manufacturer-based value creation to services-based value creation. And this is impacting how energy and electricity are being consumed, how raw material is being consumed, and just transforming the whole structure of the economy in many parts of the world. In the US, in Europe, we're also seeing this trend in China today, where the services sector is starting to play a bigger role than the manufacturing sector in China. So transformations like these are imposing a revisit to the business models by power utilities, by energy companies, and by technology companies like GE. So this brings me to the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you.